Yes, so today is December 13th, the last meeting of the year, and hopefully we can make a decision in this meeting to cast a release Kepler 0.4 as we discussed in a very early meeting in the planning. So I just want to get a feedback from you. How do you feel about this iteration? Is this a good time to have everybody together and working on the projects as we planned? Have we done everything we promised? And any actions follow up? So last time I checked, so as we discussed, the urgence and highest priority needs to be closed, and that is our release criteria. So for this release, we have end-to-end integration ready, and we have that's in the CI. We have current unit test coverage. I think the address now is 51%, and we have documentation with all the deployments options and metrics. So that is great. And we have most of the operator working ready. So we anticipate the operator can be released by next week. So this is our plan for the 0.5 release. Anybody have any suggestions?
If I can just add for the operator, if I recall, the only thing that's left would be my unit tests, and okay. I made a PR of a completed unit test, and pretty much the rest of today I'm going to just make more unit tests to cover the ensuring functions and the reconciler functions, and it's all going to be based on.
Hello?
And when that's done, that should be easily cover.
Your call it broke, so we didn't hear, I think, the last phrase. Sorry.
Basically, it's just it's gonna cover. It's all gonna be based on that one unit test which I pushed. I can include the pull request, and I'm just waiting on Parul to check it.
Right.
But it's just gonna be based on that, and when that's done, which should be today or early tomorrow, that should be way more than 50% code coverage for unit tests.
Okay.
I think. And if I'm not mistaken, that should pretty much end the operator work.
All right. So the order is we release 0.4 Kepler first, and then the operator we're just using that container image to release the operator manifest. Okay. Thank you, Kelly, for the update.
Yeah. Where should I include the PR?
No, I think you should. Yeah, just go ahead with your PRs.
Okay.
Your audio is a little bit. Yeah. Can you maybe turn off your video? So.
Okay. Let me see if I can. Over. Sure. Is better now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay. I think AirPods always has a problem with my Mac for certain reason. Okay, this is much better.
Yeah, it's much better actually. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. So that's for that. And let's go through the finished PRs. So we have the test coverage over 50%. We have the documentation. Thanks for everybody's contribution. We have the documentation looks very comprehensive to me.
So there are two remaining bugs. One is on the GPU. So I have a PR over there. So the basic idea is that when we use the NVIDIA the management library, we have to use their CUDA, either the CUDA-based image or just the CUDA runtime image. I think the base image is much smaller, so we rebase the container image using the CUDA RHEL-8 UBI. So that's where I just include all the NVIDIA driver and CUDA libraries. So once that's the container image starts, it can work with NVIDIA operator. So so that's two of the changes. I think Dave Gray also have another issue, because the matrix he sees on the Kepler side is not quite consistent with the matrix he sees on the NVIDIA exporter. So I'm going to debug that one issue again. So that's for my side. And Marcelo, I think you also have updates on the GPU frequency.
Yes. So the short story, it's working now. The long story is we were working together, isn't it? So to understand how to improve the CPU frequency calculation, especially because reading the files, it's very expensive. Because it's open a lot of files. Of course, we can maybe keep the files open, then close them, because when we close the file, it goes to the heap, and the garbage collector tries to delete, things, and then we see a lot of CPU utilization in Kepler because it's opening too many files and closing it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons it's the CPU frequency. Okay. And then we try for, the idea is if we have counters, first of all, the CPU frequency can only be collecting the bare metal. It's not the VM. The VM doesn't expose that, but we can have a bare metal that doesn't have, hardware counters. So we still support the options to read the files if hardware counter is not available. But if hardware counter is available, we can calculate that. So, but first of all, we were using this kernel, trace point, the first implementation to get the CPU frequency. But as you pointed, it was not working in one machine. And this is because the trace point, it's only activated when the governor has some policy that change the frequency. But if the governor, the Linux governor is performance, for example, the kernel doesn't change the CPU frequency. So it never activates the function, so BPF cannot trace the CPU frequency. But just to mention here, if the kernel is not changing the CPU frequency, doesn't mean that the CPU frequency doesn't change, because this is a hardware thing. So the BIOS can have also different policy that actually fights against the Linux policy. Anyway, this is another thing, but the BIOS can have like that. And then investigating that, it's possible to use hardware counters to calculate CPU frequency. It's very simple. It's just the number of cycles, and then there is another counter that is called reference cycles. It's a general counter, so any machine can be that has hardware counters. We can collect hardware counts, can expose this, so we can calculate CPU frequency. And because of that, we are including a new counters in it, so we'll have now 4 counters. And there is like a eBPF code. They have like something that they say. It's related to the Linux kernel anyway, but if we are collecting more counters than available physical counters, and this is very dependent of the CPU architecture. There are CPU, for example, they have 2, 3, 4, or 5, or even 8 physical counters. It depends a lot. So even for machines that have 2, for example, we are collecting 3, and then we will have this problem also. So the kernel multiplex, it's doing multiplexing, which means it gives some time to calculate one one metric, CPU cycles, for example, in the counter, and then you erase this counter and you use for another metric. To do that, someone saying something?
No, just my noise. Go ahead.
Okay. So, and because of that, it's actually do some extrapolation for the whole time. So because it do extrapolation, it's actually not really showing the exactly metric that it collects for the hardware counters. And we don't want to use extrapolation. And actually the regular function that collects the hardware counters, eBPF documentation say there is a bug there. They say it's better to use the new function. And this new function returns a structure that has the counter value, the time that the counter was being used to collect the metric, and the total running time of the counter collection. So we can normalize the counter anyway. Not going too much detail on that already. I already went too much details. I wrote these informations in the PR, and we can now get the real value. The short story about that is to get this. That's why I'm talking about all of this. To get this, it wasn't working the function that has the multiplex information of the counter. Okay, so after weeks of debugging that, turns out that the problem was related to it doesn't work if we use trace point. So because in our implementation of BPF, we trace the context switch using a trace point, and it doesn't work with this new function of, it's not really new because it's kernel 4. All kernel 4.13 already has this function. But anyway, it doesn't work with that. If we use key probe, it works. So I changed to key probe, and now everything's working. So we are collecting the normalizing the multiplexing of the. I also breaking different functions also to be easier to read the code, and we are using multiplexing the counters information to actually normalize and get the real value from the counters, not the extrapolation. So that's it's the real value that we are seeing. And then we also using the key probe to be able to read. So you see, it's like perf counter value. So before it was perf count only to read the perf counter value. And also we can calculate the CPU frequency using a general calculation for that. Yeah, that's I also changed just one thing. When I was reviewing that, there was a bug to calculate the CPU time. To update the CPU time, it wasn't using the update function. It was using actually lookup and init, which actually doesn't update the timestamp. So actually, BPF was getting the wrong CPU time. Now I fixed that. It will report the right CPU time. So and just to conclude, sorry for the long explanation. So after this PR, we get rid of many expensive calls in the Kepler, and it's improving the performance because of the whole thing. It's to improve the performance, the whole goal here. Yeah, I finished.
Thank you, Marcelo. This is a wonderful explanation. I will test the PR and see. I will get back to you
So
tomorrow.
And when is the deadline for the release? When is the last day?
So we anticipate this Friday we cast the release, and then if anything goes wrong, nobody will complain on the weekend. Hopefully.
Okay.
So I will get back to that as soon as I can, and hopefully we can pick up this PR before tomorrow, so we can have more tests on Thursday and Friday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other issues on Kepler before we move on to the test? Right. So I think one of the biggest achievements in this iteration is that the CI and it gets much improved. So we have both unit tests and end-to-end tests in the CI, and we also consolidate many of the actions into GitHub actions. So if you are looking at the repo here, the organization here, we have GitHub actions just to reduce a lot of using a lot of reusable actions to deploy the eBPF, and hopefully we can also using that for deploy clients class as well. I think this is the command, but at the moment, I think it's just deploys the eBPF dependencies and also gets the kubectl. So potentially we can also move the cluster sync and cluster up into the GitHub action. So whenever you start something on both GitHub, on Kepler as well as the operator, you can use in the GitHub actions to set up the environments, and we can use the same environments between multiple repos.
Yeah, I think this is good, but to have the cluster sync, it helps for development also. So when we have our own cluster, to test things. So
yeah,
I'm just thinking that if we have two ways to do that, maybe they get not updated, or we need to update two different things. So
yeah,
we
so
definitely need to have it local also. But...
yeah, so maybe we can move the cluster up into its own repo. So that means the cluster management and the cluster sync up. So they will have their own repo. So Kepler can use it and the operator can use it. And
right.
That's for the next iteration. We can consider some of the sharing capabilities between different repos and have the consistent CIs everywhere.
Yep.
And documentation, so move on to make docs. If you see the GitHub Actions pipeline works as well. Whenever we move the PR, merge PR, the website will be updated. So this is what we have at the moment. We have the installation, we have designs, and troubleshooting, and all those customizations are over there. So the suggestion is that whenever you make major changes, under user visible or just developer visible changes, please also update the PR, the documentation as well. So we get updates from operator from Kai. So I think it's in good progress. We anticipate we can get it by next week. We can get it released by next week, and the operator will also be registered with the operator hub. So the registration will take another round of time by the operator hub CI. So we don't know when that will happen, but as soon as it's over there, we can install operators through your cluster very, very easily. And we also have a Helm chart now.
Yeah, thanks, Huaming. And I add the CI integration into Kepler Helm chart recently, and thank you for your review and merge to the main. Also, I have the one proposal to add our release candidate, our release into the our release directory on the same repository.
Okay.
Then they can directly use this. And also add the documentation. You also merge it to our documentation.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks so much for the information. So eventually, hopefully, we can generate all these tar files through GitHub Actions from CI as well.
Yeah, it's can be do later.
Okay. All right. So the decision is we're going to have this release this Friday. If you are, with the critical issues is the GPU metrics and as well as the frequency, CPU frequency. As soon as we have those two PRs, we are going to cut the release. So Peru is sick today, so she will cast release, create the release branch, and also tag it. So once we make that available, the container image will also be tagged. And so whenever we use the image, we are using the tagged release, not from the latest. And the operator will be released on its own place next week. I'm just Penghui, you are going to make that available, and then we're going to see everything. And also during this 3 months exercise, we get some new contributors, and that is a very good news for everybody. We have more people to join us. Currently, we
wonderful news.
Yeah.
Welcome to them. Yeah.
Hopefully, we can get more and more every time. So, Nikki and Penghui joined our community, joined our groups together. So, do we have? So, Penghui, can you just give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah. Thank you, Huaiming. And I'm Penghui. You can call me Penghui or Peng if Penghui is hard to pronounce. I work for IBM. I located at Beijing. I'm working for several projects and products, mostly related to the content management database NoSQL. I'm an Apache CodeDB committer, and also I'm working on the DBS service, and also right now I work on the IBM Cloud IS layer, especially on the VPC. I'm quite glad to have this chance to work with you and the Huaiming and other leaders leadership, and I am quite glad to work with you all to make more contribution.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
Hi. So I'm Nikki. At WeWorks, I'm a software engineer. I work on a consulting project right now. Previously, I was a maintainer of EKS-CTL, the EKS CLI. And I work a lot on GitOps with a focus on Flux and things like Cappy as well and Terraform. And I'm very excited to be working more on Kepler finally. I also did a talk at GitOpsCon on this, and yeah, I did a few things in the docs, and so I'm very excited to make this shiny and very accessible and drive adoption as much as possible in the ecosystem, in the tag, the environmental sustainability tag, and other spaces like that.
Thank you, Nikki. And this is a pleasure to have you all here. So we
awesome.
we just moved a little bit ahead of time. So we plan to have restart the bi-weekly meeting next year, probably in January, middle of January. There's two things. So one of these decisions come from the CNCF TLC meeting today. We'll decide whether they will have this sandbox, Kepler in the sandbox landscape. So we will hear from them today or tomorrow. I think tomorrow is more likely. The meeting is tonight. And then once that happens, we will discuss what's the best time to have the first community meeting. Next year, or maybe later this year, if they will have like a quick introduction or just quick to miss the community meeting. We can also schedule that later this year, maybe next week, if everything goes well. Otherwise, we just set up the regular bi-weekly meetings the second week of January. And then with the first meeting next year is going to be the planning meeting. So what we want to achieve in the next iteration, 0.5 release, what features we want to have, and who's willing to do what, and what kind of team we should start. So that's his idea. So let's just keep the weeks of planning, thinking in advance. And so if you decided you want to contribute more, or there's the directional wise you want to have more features for Kepler, and we can discuss this later. But before that, just feel free to fill up this HackMD doc. So, and also create PRs, and then also fix bugs, provide readmes. That will be very helpful for everybody. Sorry, I guess another meeting in the house.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan, and I'm definitely interested to know what we'll have at your CNCF meeting. Yeah, let us know, and if depends on the, as you mentioned, depends on the results, we can have another meeting to discuss about it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So any more questions, feedbacks, plans before we close out the meeting?
When do you plan to take vacation to enjoy Christmas Day?
At 23rd, I'm leaving on 23rd and coming back on 2nd of January next year.
Okay, enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a nice happy new year for everyone.
Yeah.
And if we don't talk to you, and the Merry Christmas for the ones that celebrate that.
And also don't forget the World Cup.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to meet you all and have this so productive year together. And hopefully we can achieve more by next year. Make the world more sustainable.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. Then that's the end of the meeting.